Hey Bey Beys, welcome back to another Beyblade Burst video. Today I wanted to try something a little bit different. I was just going to show off some pictures of the most recent Season 6 leaks and give my quick thoughts on them, but in the process of doing a little bit of research on the new main character, I was inspired to give a bit of a deeper dive into what I found. So a little while ago we had some images leak of the Korokoro magazine, one of which showed the new protagonist of Season 6, reportedly called Daikokuten, sitting on a throne atop a mountain of presumably defeated Beyblades. The text has been roughly translated to, from what I've seen, Daikokuten calls himself the Demon King. Up until now, all the protagonists have been heroes who have fought for justice, and now Bell will try to destroy everything with his Demon Bey. So that's a pretty cool description. Daikokuten translates to Big Black Sky and is actually a Japanese god of the Great Darkness or Great Blackness. And this was about all I'd seen on Reddit, the World Beyblade Organization forums, and YouTube. So not knowing much about Japanese mythology, I wanted to kind of dig into Daikokuten's origin and learn more about what he was and what he represented. So I really enjoyed reading about all of it, and I wanted to share it with you guys, and figured mixing things up on the channel would be a nice change of pace. So I'm a white dude who barely speaks English, let alone Japanese or any other language, so please forgive me if I butcher some or all of these names. This is also not the most in-depth description of these gods, but I wanted to give you guys a bit of what I had found. In Japanese mythology, Daikokuten is one of the Shichifukuchin, also known as the Seven Lucky Gods, or the much cooler name, the Seven Gods of Fortune. Taking heavy influence from Hindu and Buddhism, most of these gods came to Japan through communication with their Chinese neighbors in the 600s to 700s or so. So for the Seven Gods of Fortune, they appear during the first few days of the new year, and they sail across their ship between the heavens and earth, bringing happiness and gifts, kind of like a pack of god-tier Santa Clauses. The Seven Gods of Fortune kind of have 8 members, 2 of which are sometimes included, sometimes not, and a couple of the gods inhabit the same body sometimes, so here are the 8 gods of the 7 Gods of Fortune. Ebisu, the god of labor, prosperity, and wealth in business. Patron of fishermen. Ebisu is the lone god of this group, whose origins are completely Japanese. He's also referred to the laughing god. He was born without bones, and was sent down a river by his parents. Great parenting. Bishamonten is the god of fortune in war and battles, associated with authority and dignity. He is usually clad in armor, holding a spear and a small padoga, symbolizing the divine house of treasure that he is entrusted to guard. Benzaitin, she's the lone female who is always included in the Gods of Fortune. She's the patron of artists, dancers, geishas, and writers, and is the goddess of talent, beauty, and music. She's heavily associated with Tori shrines, and is usually depicted holding a biwa, the instrument you're hearing playing in the background, a very important aspect to how stories were told in Japan. She is usually shown surrounded by white snakes or white dragons. Jirojin, the god of the elderly and longevity, he's considered the incarnation of the southern pole star. Jirojin sometimes shares a body with Fukuro Kuju. The body they inhabit is usually that of an old man traveling with a staff, a fan, and followed by either a deer, crane, or a turtle, all symbols in Japan of long life. Fukuro Kuju is one of the 2 gods who's sometimes omitted from this list of 7. The reason he's sometimes omitted is because he's often confused with Jirojin, being that they share the same body. One of the things that does separate him, though, is he's pretty short with a really long forehead, like ridiculously long forehead. One thing to note about the staff that both Jirojin and Fukuro Kuju carry is that affixed to the staff is a scroll, and that scroll is said to have the listed lifespan of every being on Earth in there. Another god that is sometimes included and sometimes left out of the party is Kichijoten. She's another goddess, this time the goddess of happiness, fertility, and beauty. Her name translates to auspicious heavens, and is the Buddhist version of the Hindu goddess Lakshmi. Hotai comes from Budai, and he's probably the most recognizable of all these gods to those of us in the West. He's actually the laughing Buddha, or also known as the fat Buddha. Now, Budai is a semi-historical figure, supposedly based on a Chinese monk. And Hotai is a massively fat, bald, poor traveling monk who carries his possessions in a cloth sack, which is what his name literally translates to, cloth sack. Now, he's so fat that his robes don't even fit over his body, always exposing his bulbous belly. Statues of Hotai are associated with good luck, so when you see that big-bellied Buddha, go ahead and give it a rub. He's the god of fortune and popularity, he's the guardian of children, patron of diviners, and bartenders. Our final god for the 7 gods of fortune is Daikokuten. Daikokuten is the god of commerce, prosperity, wealth, and is the male fertility god. He's the patron of cooks, farmers, and bankers. Usually shown as a chubby man with short legs, large smile, his signature flat black hat, and a mustache. He tends to carry a bag full of valuable objects, a lucky golden mallet that grants wishes, and is surrounded by barrels of food. He can also take the form of a female, known as Daikukunyo, or Daikukutenyo, which literally translates to she of blackness, or she of great blackness of the heavens, respectively. Daikokuten is also considered a demon hunter. Now, this could foreshadow a change in Bel's character later in the season, going from a demon king to a demon hunter himself, and that would make for a much more interesting character arc than what we've gotten in previous seasons. Now, one thing that really interests me about Daikokuten and his origins is the fact that he comes from this group of 7 gods, and I could easily see that being the basis for the 7 main characters, if that's what we get, in Season 6. Now, we could have Ebisu with a defense-type Beyblade, representing how he was able to overcome his deformity in hard early life. Bishomanten with a strong attack type, being that he's the god of war. Benzaiten with a balance type, reflecting her dominion over dance, able to change and adapt to her opponent's movements. Fukurokujo and Jurogen wielding stamina types, as they're the gods of longevity. Hotai, being the big-bellied god that he is, would have a massive defensive type Beyblade, immovable and welcoming of any challenge. Kichijoten, if she makes the cut, no offense girl, would be a balance type baby maybe, since she just kind of exists. I really don't know what we would do for her. And Bel, he has what's a very aggressive looking Beyblade, so he's definitely an attack type. And we've seen a lot of his parts now in the most recent leaks. So that's another thing that I wanted to kind of take a look at in this video. So this is the most recent image that we've gotten of the Season 6 Beyblade for Bel. I don't think we've got a name for it, so I'm not going to come up with anything, but it does remind me a lot of Valkyrie, both in the chip, in the face of the chip, and kind of just the overall shape, being that it has the 3 large wings. And if we kind of look at just the layer itself, we have the internal chip, the outer ring, and then the inner piece there looks like it's made of metal, and most likely replaceable. If we look at the first picture that we saw of this Beyblade, the gold metal ring there, besides obviously being a different color, looks a lot more ornate and detailed than the piece that we have on this new image. The chip is giving off really strong GT vibes. The plastic layer with the replaceable inner metal weight held together with the chip at the center. Now this is purely speculative, but what I'm guessing based off the most recent picture here is that it definitely looks like that metal piece is replaceable and different based off these 2 images. There's a lot of heavy shadowing that makes it look like it isn't just plastic molded together, and in the up-close picture on the older Beyblade, it definitely looks like metal. I do like the GT system a fair bit, not quite as much as the Cho-Z system, where we had, metal built into all the Beyblades, but it was in very different parts. So you could have Beyblades like Dead Hades, Phoenix, or Spriggan, where they may not be very customizable, but the position of where the metal is or the gimmicks allowed them to be very, very different and unique on their own. And I really like those gimmicks. It's something that I feel like we lost a little bit in GT and started to get back kind of in Sparking, but that was mostly due to the chassis system, which I'll get into in a minute. Now, with no real metal on the outside on the ring, or rubber or anything, this Beyblade doesn't look like it's too exciting, so it's going to have to be kind of perfectly shaped for it to really stand out in any competitive sense. But it is really, really great looking. This is aesthetically a top-tier Beyblade. And just a quick complaint that I have for chip systems in general is, on the GT side, the chips were tied to the teeth on the Beyblade, which I really don't mind as much, especially when compared to the chips for sparking. I really, really don't like that unless the chip has metal built into it, it is effectively worthless. You lose the ability to use chips like Death Scyther, Valkyrie, Achilles, Longness, or Wyvern, all these really popular characters you just can't use in any competitive sense because they're just so outclassed in weight compared to the chips with metal or, with the metal core in there. So something like Lucifer 1 or 2, Hyperion 2, Helios 2, the Diaboluses, or Solomon, those are really the only chips that you can effectively use in a competitive setting. If it was completely up to me, I would have the chips be essentially just aesthetic, so you could use whatever chip you feel most connected to. Kind of like the Bit Beast in the plastic gen. And this is, again, not a major complaint, but it is a complaint that I have nonetheless. Next, taking a look at the disc, it reminds me a lot of the Hasbro Drake disc, at least in shape, and it definitely doesn't look like we can attach frames to them, at least this disc. So it better be really heavy. It does look pretty thick, and hopefully TT starts to give us much, much heavier discs to make this competitive against the sparking bays. Because of the double chassis system introduced with sparking, we were getting Beyblades that approached 80 grams in weight. And if we go back to that GT era in weight, these Beyblades will be completely dead on arrival. Absolutely no ability to compete with the sparking bays. Between the weight and the burst resistance that the double chassis system adds, there's just no way to compete with that if we essentially go back to GT era. These discs are going to have to be 30 plus grams out of the gate for them to remain competitive there. And as much as I hate to see the chassis system leave, because I feel like there was a lot more that they could have done with it, I really did enjoy chassis like 2D, 2A, 4A that added gimmicks to the layers. So you may have these really plain layers, but then you can add these chassis to them to give them really cool gimmicks. The GT discs did have gimmicks on them, but I feel like most of them weren't really effective because they didn't make contact with the opposing Beyblades in the same way that the chassis do. So you could have something like the Jet Layer with its, free spinning in one direction, locked in the other gimmick, mix it with 2S to add another free spinning layer to that Beyblade, or put something like 2A with all of its rubber contact points on hollow for this attack bay with metal and rubber contact points all over the place. It really allowed for a high level of customizability in some senses, but also for a lot of homogeneity, because so few of the chassis were actually competitively viable. So you had some, chassis like 2A, 2B, 2S, 1S wheel, and 3A only on longness, and those were about the only chassis I'd see people using with any real effectiveness. So I'd like to see more of a wide range of viable discs with this new system. So finally we have the new driver. There's a small plastic flat sitting inside of this larger red ring, and my first thought is that the plastic flat would retract into the red hole flat, kind of like Ultimate Reboot, and that red flat may be made out of rubber or palm plastic, giving it a much different movement pattern than with the small plastic flat. It could also just be spring-loaded like Nothing or Power, in which case it would give, definitely a different feel to the driver. Regardless of how this driver ends up performing, I'm really excited to see exactly what it does. It's always cool to get a new driver that has some gimmick to it, as opposed to something like, we've been getting a lot of these remakes of older drivers. The high versions are pretty cool. The metal versions, I'm actually really nervous about. I saw a video put out by Universal Coffee, whether it was yesterday or today, showing him just clicking it maybe 50 times or so against 2D. Or 1D rather, and it just tore it up. You could see the shavings all over the place. So that was kind of our worst fear when it came to the metal drivers, and it looks like that is definitely going to be the case. So I hope they don't stick with the metal contact points on these new drivers, but that may be exactly what we're getting. And then we did get a new image showing, I'm not sure if it's a new Beyblade or an existing Beyblade, but it's very clearly a Beyblade, a grip, a new launcher, which looks kind of similar to the sparking launcher from the bottom, and the new stadium, which has 2 pockets, but otherwise it looks to be very similar to the standard stadium. This may be a little bit larger, but it's really tough to tell until we can get our hands on it. So this is kind of all the new stuff that we've seen for Season 6 of Beyblade Burst. I'm really, really, really glad that they are continuing Burst and not moving on to a brand new system. I did just kind of get back into Beyblade, so it's nice to have all of my parts available. So what do you guys think about the lore that goes into Bell Daikokuten and his name, and what that may represent for the new series going forward? Let me know if you guys enjoyed my take on this. Let me know what you think of the new Beyblade and all its parts down below. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do so. It definitely helps out. We're almost at 50 subscribers, and I think once we hit 100, I'll do a giveaway. So thank you all again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.